Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Hi, I'm Claire Elliott, the curator of the exhibition, The Curatorial Imagination of Walter Hopps. Thank you all so much for joining us for our program this evening, an artist talk with Robert Longo. The Curatorial Imagination of Walter Hopps will be on view through August 13th. The exhibition explores the influential career of Walter Hopps, the Menil's founding director, and features more than 130 artworks by 70 artists, including Robert Longo's Master Jazz, a large-scale ensemble of charcoal and ink drawing, silkscreen painting, and sculpted relief, completed in 1983. I'd like to begin by thanking our speaker, Robert Longo, as well as Alex Bay from Longo's Studio, who helped us to organize this evening. I also need to thank our former Director of Public Programs, Lauren Pollock, and of course, the tireless Tony Martinez for his help in organizing this evening's event. And a very special thanks to the Cockrell Family Fund for their generous support of the Menil's Artist Talk series this year. As always, the Menil public programs are free and open to everyone. We have several additional programs in conjunction with this exhibition. This Sunday, in a few days, I will be giving a curator's talk at 3 p.m. in the gallery. I'll give you some background on Hopps's career, as well as point out some highlights from the artworks on view. And on June 15th, please join me in a conversation with Mel Chin, Terrell James, and Don Quaintance to celebrate the recent release of the publication Artists We've Known, Selected Works from Walter Hopps and Caroline Huber collection. That book is related closely to the exhibition, although it's not a catalog, and copies are available at the Menil's bookstore. Finally, on Friday, August 11th at 8 p.m., we'll be partnering with Aurora Picture Show to screen a selection of films that are related to the exhibitions. Details about all of these events are available on the Menil's website. So before we get started, please silence your cell phones. Following the presentation, we'll be taking some questions, time permitting, from the audience. Robert Longo will not be available to sign anything, but a selection of signed books by Longo is available in the Menil bookstore if you are interested in that. This program is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing on the Menil's YouTube site in a matter of weeks. And now, a few words of introduction for our speaker. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Robert Longo to the Menil collection. Longo was born in Brooklyn and raised in Long Island, New York. He graduated high school in 1970, just weeks after a former classmate of his was among the 4 students killed by the National Guard at Kent State University. This tragedy, as well as the iconic photographs that resulted from it, were formative in Longo's dedication to political activism and in his keen understanding of how media shapes and distorts our reality. After completing an art degree at the State University College in Buffalo, New York, Longo moved to New York City in 1977, where he achieved early fame as a prominent member of the Pictures Generation, a group of artists working in New York who appropriated and recontextualized popular imagery. These artists questioned concepts of originality and authenticity while turning a critical lens to capitalism, popular culture, and mass media. In the 1980s, Longo emerged as a key figure in New York's underground art scene, playing in rock bands, producing music videos, contributing to alternative magazines, and organizing exhibitions and performances. In 1989, art historian Hal Foster located the sharply political work of Longo as, quote, in the war zone between schizoid obscenity and utopian hope. Since those early years, Longo has continued to work across media, including in photography, drawing, sculpture, painting, performance, and even feature-length films. His genre-blurring works, often of immense scale, remain deeply engaged with domestic politics, climate change, and the social and racial injustices with which we continue to grapple. Please help me to welcome Robert Longo.
I'm gonna time myself so I don't go too long. I don't do this too often anymore. When you get older, you tend to think you know less, So I'm here because of Walter. He talked to me. He was incredibly important to me, and that's like 40 years ago or something like that. And so I thought what I would do. So we're talking about this piece that Walter got for you, and it's very funny. It's really big. People say I make big work. We were just over looking at Twomley's work, and it's fucking gigantic. Really, what? Come on. And looking at the Twomley stuff, I go, I hate it. I'm so jealous of that work. I have to make this stuff. I had to go control where he had all his freedom. And I remember how the reaction that my generation had to, you have to also realize that around the same time, Walter was actually quite fascinated with what was going on in the 80s. There was all this picture making that was happening, and it was kind of divided between kind of like neo-expressionism, like Schnabel, and like a European guy. So there was like a lot of art that was about what art was, and my generation, my gang of people that were at that dinner party, were about what art could be. So in that sense, this piece represents something. It was one of the, I think it was second or third combine that I made. But Walter really helped me become the artist that I became. And what I'm going to do now is, Tony, can you help me out? So what I'm going to show you is basically 45 years of art in 3 minutes. So like I was saying, Walter was a bit of a mentor. I mean, I was really very angry, and when I was younger, I wanted to basically kill people with my art. You know, if I couldn't do it visually, I wanted the work be able to fall off the wall and kill you. But somehow I had this incredible aggression, and he really had these incredible fiery eyes, and he was very calming in a weird way, you know. And he, like I said, he was very fascinated by what was going on in New York and the competitiveness that was happening in New York at that time, particularly between me and Schnabel and David Sally and some other people. And I think he thought it was really kind of cool that we were, it was almost like street gangs. We should have had leather jackets with the names of our gallery on the back. You know, so yeah, he was really, really pretty important about this stuff. And Master Jazz, what was interesting when I made, so my work started off with Men in Cities. It started actually with this relief from a still from a Fassbinder film, and this was the picture show which kind of launched everything. And this was my studio in 1977, and the work, I started focusing on these kind of isolated figures, but they always meant to be as a group. My first couple of exhibitions, the gallery was selling them separately, and I bitched to Walter about how the fact that they're not supposed to be separate. They're supposed to be like groups. It's one work. It's like chords in a song, like a guitar, like power chords, like bam, bam. Anyway, he said, then make work that sticks together. Which is like, duh. So these were all, this was like one piece basically, which didn't get sold as one piece, unfortunately. But this is how I envisioned it. And I took, the other thing is I was appropriating images from the media, and I decided I could take my own pictures of people to make my own drawings. So I started photographing my friends. I mean, they were never yuppies. They basically, like punk new wave people, everybody had skinny ties, and it was really interesting. New York was kind of divided by Broadway. The east side of Broadway was like where the kind of day-glow spray paint East Village art was happening. West of it was where we were. We all were more like, looked more like we were out of film noir films or something. That skinny ties, lapels, and you know, women wore dresses and things like that. So this is Gretchen. That's Cindy. And this is at the Met during the pictures exhibition. And my younger son at the time was there with his girlfriend. His girlfriend said to me, "Wow, did you get the idea for that drawing from the iPod ads?" And I was about to like explain to him that these drawings are older than the people in the pictures. You know, these people were in their 20s, these drawings are 30 years old. And I realized at that point, if you become successful as an artist, your work becomes like, you lose authorship of it, you know? So what I did is I forced the work to stay together. So this is a big show, a two-part show at Castelli's and Metro Pictures. And the first combines came out of this, which was this. And what happened with these first combines, the Museum of Modern Art bought this. The second one we made was Master Jazz, which was bought by a guy named Robert Learman, I'm sorry, this is still from video, I'll show you later. But what happened with Master Jazz is Bill T. Jones said to me, "You know, there aren't any black people in your work." And I said, "Because I'm making pictures of the doomed white race, you know." And he said, "But you know, you need black people in it." So he kind of convinced me to kind of like Master Jazz has basically this screaming black man, because he said we're not being seen, and I thought, what better way but put him in this picture where he's screaming. He's like the sound of this piece. These pieces always had these structures that were really important. This is like a figure, like she's the reclining figure, like the men are like the feet. Bill is like the chest and the heart. The building is like basically the genitals. but I always thought that this was the sound of Bill T. Jones. So he kind of encouraged me to like branch out a bit more. And like this piece is called Rock for Light. It was named after a band that played in DC called the Bad Brains, and they were an all-black punk rock band that played the most intense, fastest music, and they did a name of a song called Rock for Light, which I kept on thinking, it was like idea that you make music so fast that you eventually see God. So this piece was I found this photograph of, in the magazine for Virgin Islands. It had a black couple being raised up out of the water on vacation. I thought, this is so cool, and I thought, this is the future, and this piece became that. Anyway, the combines were more connections of pieces together. This is the retrospective I did so in a weird way, Walter kind of encouraged me to like fight to keep the work together, not to do these singular things. And what it bred was, so what happened is all these combines were so successful, they all ended up at museums. Like this is in the Tate in London. Another one is at the Art Institute. It was like, this is the course of like maybe 4 or 5 years where it was like every piece I was making was like, I was like hitting home runs. It was like they would end up at museums, and Walter could not find a piece to buy. And we talked about Master Jazz, and I mentioned that this guy, Robert Learman, owned it. And he convinced Learman to sell it to him, I was much happier. This is my dad, who looked a lot, you remember the guy who was head of Russia at the time, Antropov? You guys are probably not old enough, but this is like underneath red glass. In the museum in Jocelyn, Nebraska, it was on loan to the museum in Jocelyn, Nebraska. And they wanted to buy it, and I wanted to keep it. I remember having a fight with my father on the phone, and I said to him, like, look, if you don't stop fighting with me, I'm going to sell this piece and you're going to be in Nebraska for the eternity. So I got it back. So these are all the combines. These all are basically relatives of Master Jazz. The title of Master Jazz is kind of funny because so back then I was usually pretty high in the studio and working. Anyway, I was listening lots of music, and I was listening to some stupid band called Flock of Seagulls. Anybody know this band? It's kind of a bit embarrassing to mention, but there was a song called, I thought they were saying Master Jazz, and I was listening to Coltrane around that time too. I thought, this is such a cool name. But actually, the name of the song was Messages. So actually, the secret name of Master Jazz is Messages. So Walter bought that piece, and he got us. So like I said, he was very fascinated what was happening with this competition of artists that was going on in New York. And Julian was having a big show at the MFA here in Houston. So he thought he's going to schedule a show of my work here and David Sally's work here. So he was going to basically put us all in combat together, and he made it so that none of us were in town at the same time, which was really kind of good. And this is my first experience here at the Menil. It was like an incredibly beautiful show. It was in that gallery down there. I had never been to this museum, and it was like, this is like the most perfect museum. I mean, you guys have the most perfect museum. The size of it is perfect. The light is... See, daylight for me is always a drag because I have glass on the pieces, so it's always a problem. But this, even so, it's diffuse, and the floor is beautiful. It was like... So when I was working on this picture, when I was doing the show, I've made all these notes, and they don't make any sense to me, but now, anyway. So while I'm working on the show, Walter would take me around, show me stuff, and I didn't realize how many floors down does it go? One floor down. I had this memory that, so he kept on coming in and saying to me, like, you want to see the most greatest pissed off painting of Jesus ever? I said, Walter, I'm busy working here. Come on, leave me alone. No, you have to come and see this. So you have to also remember, Walter would come to almost every show I'd do. He would show up. I did this retrospective in LA. He was there. Then I did retrospective in Chicago. And he would show up like in that raincoat and that hat. And he'd come there really fast, walk through like a ghost, and he'd make sure I'd see him, and then he would be gone. And he was saying, I'm busy tracking down angels. And I was like, what are you talking about? Anyway, he was like that. So anyway, I finally decided to go. Well, I won't tell you that part of the story, because I want to tell you that he took me to Mrs. de Menil's house for dinner one night. And, he said it's a Philip Johnson building. Woo. We drive up, it looks like a bowling alley to me. Have you ever seen it? It's like, I know you. Drika. Wow. Anyway, I remember seeing it and meeting her. She was so kind, and she gave me a tour of the house. And there was a picture of like the Magritte painting of the earth being held up by this ejaculation of oil. She's saying this is the logo of our company. And then I remember seeing her where she combed her hair. There was this, Walter said, look there. And there was a little, next to where she combs her hair at night before she goes to bed, there was this tiny little Warhol black electric chair. And I thought, wow. And then many, many years later, when they had the Warhol retrospective at MoMA, one of the first pieces that were in the show was that little painting. So we're having dinner. I was there, I was the idiot. There was a scientist, there was Walter, there was her, and some other guy. And the scientist guy was talking about how the universe would end in like 50 billion years or something like that. And she leans over to Walter and she says, Walter, what will happen to our collection? I went, whoa. I thought that was vision. Anyway, so the dome, so Walter takes me in an elevator, and the elevator opens up, and he says, look at this. And he says, this is the last painting that Barney Newman ever painted. It was like this gigantic red and white painting, and it was incredible. And then he says, wait, now we have to go. I thought it was different levels. I don't know how it happened, but then the next time the elevator opened up, these are all Warhol's mafia paintings, of the mafia funeral paintings, and they were incredible. So then we finally go to the last, where the elevator stops. He opens the door. The room is dark. He makes this very dramatic thing of turning on the light, which Walter was always incredibly dramatic. And he said, just wait here. And he turns on the lights, and we walk around the corner, and I walked around the corner, and sitting in the corner of the room, it must have been like, this is the corner of the room, it must have been like maybe 15 feet diameter. It was the dome of a fucking church. I mean, it was a dome of a church that had the most pissed off painting of Jesus I'd ever seen. Byzantine, like red, the red under his eyes, or like, he's like, ugh. It's like, and it was surrounded by not hundreds, maybe 20 little angels. And if you started looking at it, you realize that this dome had been chopped up into pieces. And Walter had been tracking down all these angels, and he put them all together. So they were planning to build, I guess, what was it called? A chapel here, right? And he said, oh yeah, by the way, if you climb up this ladder over here, you can see the dome, the half dome of the Mary, and they climbed up the ladder. It was quite spectacular, but it was like the fact that Walt had tracked down all these pieces to this dome of this most amazing. It was like this miraculous image. I still see it to this day. It was like, and in a weird way, that dome, Jesus looked a bit like Walter at that time. So, I mean, it was so intense. But anyway, I'm very happy to be here, and if you have any questions, I'll do it.
And I have a mic here, so if you just raise your hand, I'll bring the mic around to you.
I'll start us out so everyone else can think up their questions, but I want to hear about who you didn't get along with in the East Village. Who were those artists?
Excuse me?
Who were the East Village artists? Who were some of the artists that you were in competition with?
It wasn't East Village guys. Didn't they were like minor league people to us. They were like
Not worth
they were
mentioning.
like they were the minor league. They were. What was interesting about the East Village is that when Cindy and I were in Buffalo, we started this alternative space called Hall Walls, and it became our graduate school. And when we moved to New York, we kind of hooked up with people that came from a real serious art school, Cal Arts, but we had the same sensibility, which was really interesting. But the thing about Hall Walls, the spirit of Hall Walls was that it was outside of the system. And then the idea if you work outside the system and you make enough noise, the system will have to hear you. And that was what the East Village was. That was what's so brilliant about the East. So the East Village, you had this handful of guys that actually survived the East Village, like Coons and Peter Howell. I think that people actually survived that minor league thing to move up into the major leagues, and it was kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, the thing at that time, the competition was definitely, Mary Boone and Metro Pictures were really competitive. I mean, my galleries hated Mary. Mary hated her, and she was always trying to steal. She stole Troy Brontek away. She was trying to steal Jack Goldstein away. It was pretty intense, and I mean, I was, like I said, I'm jealous of Twomley. So I guess in a weird way, I was jealous of what Schnabel was doing, because he was kind of being like Twomley, you know. But at the same time, I just didn't believe in the artist being this miraculous conduit of like going, you know, that's enough. I just thought it required. I felt in competition with the world that existed out there, the television, movies, magazines. I felt as an artist, we had to like mediate that crap. We had to somehow fight back. And the other stuff, it just seemed like it you know, Twomley did it, you know, why do it again, you know? I mean, there's a sculpture that's there. I saw a piece recently by Julian, it was just, I mean, I think Julian is a great artist, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm very jealous of what he's done. I mean, I wish I could work like that, for sure. Maybe one day I will, you know, but like I said, I get tighter and tighter. But the competition was really, I think, is really important at that point. And like I said, Walter really dug it. He kind of waded into it. Like, I don't know what David's take on it of Walter is at all. You should find out, because, you know, did you guys ever buy Walter? Did you ever get any David Sally pieces here?
I don't think we have a David Sally.
Good. Sorry. David is a friend. I think he's a really great artist. I think he's really great. And, you know, what happens as you get older as artists, I mean, Julian and I have actually a pretty good relationship. And when we're like old war horses. And just, you know, the thing is, as an artist, it's like if you stick around long enough, you get a lot more credit than you deserve. But anyway, you know, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. But the competition was really great. I mean, the European stuff was really, you know, like Clementi and Kuki and Kia and all that stuff. I thought it was all terrible. I mean, I really liked Kiefer's work, because I thought Kiefer, when I met Kiefer and we talked, I realized that he was obsessed with being a German as much as I was obsessed with being an American, and he was trying to deal with the sins of his fathers, and I was trying to deal with mine in that sense. So I mean, I think my work is really overtly American, and particularly the last 20 years, I've really put the pedal to the metal, because I just think as an artist, we are the reporters of the time that we live in. You know, we don't have any sponsors. You know, like you look at the history of art, you have the church and the government. They were telling us what to do. Then all of a sudden, 1860 happened, and Menil and those guys. All of a sudden, what do we make pictures of? And that's a really interesting period. You know, the greatest problem for artists is what do you make pictures of in that sense. And I was mentioning, Sophie's heard all this before, but this idea in school, form and content. I was a dyslexic, so I barely got through school. I mean, still today, I don't know how I got through college. But I always remember getting my term papers where I would have like an F for the form, but I would have like a C plus for the content. And that idea of form and content is really very important as an artist. You have to deal with, and you have to, I think the picture generation was really interesting because it took this, I think what happens is this really weird equation that the generation that comes after an established generation takes as its form its content. So if you think about conceptual art was filled with a lot of shitty photographs. But what we did is, in the picture people, we took the idea of images as content. So, and then we made a new form. We made all different kinds. We were free to do whatever we want. I think like conceptual art, minimal art, abstract expressionists, they were all, for American artists, they were building this incredible hot rod for my generation to drive, I think subsequently what's interesting is, I mean, I kind of hate this whole picture generating thing, but the thing is, we're like the last ones. Since then, the whole art world is incredibly diffused, and you're not quite sure what's going on in the art world. I mean, some really great stuff is being made, don't get me wrong, but I think what's interesting is the pictures people that was a really attempt to fight back. I mean, when I was younger, I used to think technology would save us. Now I think technology will kill us. So, and we live in this culture of impatience where everything is like, I want it now. I like the fact that my work takes a really long time to make. It takes a really long time to make. I wish it was faster, of course, but anyway. But yeah, did I answer your question? Any more questions?
I just want to thank you for including Johnny Mnemonic in your opening presentation.
Oh, thank you.
I actually watched the film not too long ago. The opening scroll talks about how in the second decade of the 21st century, corporations rule, the world is threatened by a new plague, and there is a resistance movement of hackers, data pirates, and guerrilla fighters in the info wars. And so I'm just curious, do you ever finish a piece of art and think, wow, I got that right? Or more specifically, can you talk about your art and how you're trying to capture something that is, or how you're trying to capture something that you think might be?
It's very interesting that you brought that up because when I made Johnny Mnemonic, I wanted to make like this is where what Julian did was really smart. He paid for his first movie. I tried to get money for the movie. And when you get money for the movie, the people that give you the money think they can tell you what to do. So it's like you go buy a can of paint and you come home and you open it up and somebody looks over your shoulder and says, it's the wrong color. So I had a really hard time making that movie. It was torturous, but I became very, very close with Keanu to this day. But when I realized that film was 25 years old, that it was set in the future and the 25th anniversary was happening, that I needed some closure on this film. And I always originally I wanted to shoot it in black and white. So you have to understand, dealing with Hollywood, first of all, one executive said, I can't say mnemonic. Let's change it to Johnny and get his gun. I said, but there's a movie that called that already. So what I did was I had this plan. I was going to turn it black and white and dump it on the internet for the 25th anniversary. And I worked with this editor. I don't know, black and white movies are usually gray. So I did this, I turned it into really black and white. And someone said to me, you could get into a legal problem, maybe somebody will sue you. And I do have more to lose now than before. But so I sent it to one of my good producers. Because making that movie, they were always trying to figure out how to fire me, whatever. And the writer of the movie, he's such a great writer, they kept on fucking with him. It was just horrible. And so I sent it to him, and he said, this is great. Then I sent it to Keanu, and Keanu said, this is fucking great. Why don't you show it to Sony, who owns the rights to the film? I said, oh, not those people. So I sent it to Sony. They loved it. The guy that was there said, this is great. We're going to make Blu-ray, DVD. We're going to do limited releases of it. I said, you want me to do a commentary about this? I said, I don't have a lot of good shit to say about you people. He said, no, say whatever you want. Be great. So I said, oh, okay. So my wife is a director. I said, can you figure out a way how to direct a commentary for this film? But Keanu's in Paris. William Gibson is in Vancouver. And we cut this commentary, which was turned out to be really. She shot it in such a way the three of us look like we actually are really talking to. We are really talking to each other in real time. It came out really great, and we sent it to Sony. And the guy that was really enthusiastic about the film had moved up the ladder, and there was a new person in there. There's this woman that was like a robot, and I sent her the commentary, and she said, like, after she heard the first time I said, fuck, she sent it to legals. And the legal people proceeded to rip it to shreds. And they cut it out. They reduced it quite a bit. But it reminded me why I don't make movies, because I can't deal with those people. But it's interesting about that film is if you get a chance to see it now in black and white, it's so much better. It looks like my work. Every shot looks like my work. But also the content is so prescient. I mean, William Gibson is an extraordinary writer. And only recently he had to, I think they made a series, what's it called? The Peripheral, yeah. And he was, this is the only other time that they've made something out of movies out of William's work, and he's really very happy about it, which is I was happy for him about it. But yeah, it was interesting making that film for sure, but it also kind of destroyed my career for a while, because like the art world was like, well, you want to go to Hollywood, we'll forget about you as an artist. And what's interesting as an artist to experience the ebb and flow of being an artist and being a bit of an art star in the 80s, and then being blamed for the 80s, and then rebuilding my career. And yeah, there was a very funny moment in the 80s where Janelle, one of my art dealers, Julian's work was being sold for a lot more than mine was, and I was really pissed off. And it was because his stuff was paintings and mine were drawings. So I said, you know what, I'm going to kill myself. And Janelle said to me, it won't work. She said that they'll just forget you. So from that point on, I said, fuck that, I'm going to stay alive with vengeance and make sure you never forget me for that. So, but that was really important. So yeah, but this thing about like fairy godfathers, I mean, I've had really incredibly luck. I mean, luck, I said the thing about God, luck is like Walter and Robert Irwin's, I don't know if you know who Caspar Koenig is. I had a bunch of guys that were really incredibly instrumental. And also my dealers at Metro Pictures, Helene Weiner and Janelle Rearing, were just like absolute visionaries at that time. And I stayed loyal to them for 40 years as an artist. I mean, they just recently closed a gallery, and it was very strange that, what do I do? I trusted them completely, and then it was very funny to get kind of wined and dined by these people that wanted me to go there, Hausenworth or Pace, you know, whatever it was. But I ended up going with Pace because I kind of trusted them. They were also a very American gallery, which is really great. So they've been really great. And I have to admit, Helene and Janelle were always a bit. Whenever I did an exhibition, they would usually leave town because they were afraid that I would destroy the gallery, because it was like they just couldn't deal with it anymore. And whenever I tried to make really big work, they were like, Janelle had this expression where she'd go, I said, well, I really want to make this at 25 feet long. She'd go, huh. Which was like, oh, it was so hard. Pace, you know, I don't have that problem anymore. So it was great. So like I said, about being lucky, yeah. So the thing is, what's interesting is, what I think one of the things I learned from Walter as well is this idea is, as an artist, you have to constantly keep on trying to grow. And I think I just turned 70 recently, and in the last couple of years I've been trying secretly to develop a new body of work that is radically different than everything else I've done before. I don't know if I'll do it. I have Menil cities, I had the combines, and I had the charcoal drawings. could I make a fourth body work? I always think about de Kooning, how, those late paintings that de Kooning made, that everybody thought they sucked. Now everybody thinks they're brilliant. So that's what I'm trying to aim for. But so I'm gonna make some really shitty work for a while that you all think is really great once I'm dead. So, any other questions?
What is the thing that's driving you the most to create right now? And do you think you have a greater sense of urgency now than any previous decade?
Death. I became an artist because I didn't think I could do anything else. Really, I think that was really part of it. I was dyslexic. I couldn't. It was. I thought about that. What am I going to do? I took at one point in New York when I couldn't make it. You have to understand, as an artist, my generation when we moved to New York, we never thought we were going to make any money. Never. I mean, it was like our heroes are like, I worked for Vito Conci and Dennis Oppenheim. Those guys were barely getting by, and they were like stars. So the idea of making money, I briefly went to truck driver school, but I couldn't get it together to back the tractor trailer, and so I quit that. So I drove a taxi for a while, which was really great because, not having any money, back then you'd go to work with no money and you'd come home with money. It was really great. And that was really great. And I was driving a taxi, and Linda Cathcart, who was at the ICA, yeah, at that time, I was in a show there with Judy Pfaff, Jennifer Bartlett, Bangles, yeah, and me. And it was like the greatest thing that had ever happened to me. And I remember being in a taxi that day and saying, okay, this is my last day, fuck it. And I'm going to do a show in Houston. It was just really, I remember that really vividly. Yeah, it was really important. So, again, Linda Cathcart is like one of my fairy godmothers for sure. But yeah, so, did I answer your question? Yeah, the thing is also, I look at my work and I keep on, whenever I see exhibitions of my work, I still look at that and I go, I could have done that better, this could be better, or that could be, So, yeah, I'm still pretty hungry about making stuff. I also like it. It's really fun. It's not that much fun to make, not like Twomley. But anyway. But it's fun to see it when it's done, for sure. I was trying to explain, but ironically, like I said before, it seemed like as artists get older, they get looser, and what's happened is I've gotten tighter. I've kind of fought against this kind of inclination to get looser, and well, that's what I'm trying to do a little bit in my little. I have a secret studio that occasionally my wife sees, and nobody else. Where I basically embarrass myself on a daily basis. I think when you're younger, it's easier to embarrass yourself in public. At my age, not so good. So, any more questions?
I remember that show. It was really an extraordinary experience, and I'll never forget that bronze figure from that. And it's great to see the slides again, because I had kind of forgotten what else was in that show, because my memory is so dominated by that bronze figure. It was only years later when I learned about your work, kind of crossover work, and with the downtown New York scene from a music point of view, and the album cover you did for Glenn Branca, and then the videos that you did later, and some of the music and so forth. And I wonder if you could say a little bit about, looking back now, how that fluidity and that permeability between the artists and the musicians worked, and how you feel about that now, looking back on it decades later.
Well, I can look at work and I can tell you the music I listen to. The music is always on in the studio. So morning starts off with kind of usually Bach's, Yo-Yo Ma, the solo concertos, and by midday it turns into like rock and roll. Or I really like Godspeed Black. I like music, rock and roll that doesn't have singing so much. After lunch, it's usually rap music. By the end of the day, it turns into jazz. So music is like the gasoline that powers my work for sure. What was interesting is that when I moved to New York, the art world was dying. They existed at that time. So what was weird is like the white galleries, the white rooms of the galleries were less interesting than the dark nights of CBGBs. And it seemed like punk scene, like the Ramones and Talking Heads, things like was so much more exciting. And the thing is, the virtuosity to play in a band at that point, you didn't have to be virtuosic. You could just basically, you could bang out a couple of chords, you could make a band. So, and I had played in bands in high school, so I had had some chops, and I played in a bunch of bands. And then I hooked up with Bronca and Reese Chatham, who they're like the Phil Glass and Steve Reich of my generation. And they were playing rock and roll, but then they got increasingly more involved in kind of like art music. And I mean, like Glenn and Reese started doing things with like hundreds of electric guitars. I mean, Reese did a thing at Sacré-Cœur in Paris with 400 electric guitars. And I still play with Reese. I still play with him. We're going to do a thing in Basel. Usually when I have a show, at the end of the show, I ask Reese is in Paris. He comes over, and I did Glenn's last album cover. Yeah, I mean, music is like really important. The thing was interesting. I'm on the board of directors of a experimental music place in Brooklyn called Issue, and the thing is, as artists, we benefited from music, but the music scene, the experimental music scene in New York has died totally. I mean, the irony is that the digital age has made one of a kind that much more valuable. You can make copies. So musicians are fucked. The only way you make money as a musician is if you play live, in big concerts, things like that. So art is a one-of-a-kind recording of a performance. And that's why the digital age has made art that much more valuable, because it is a one-of-a-kind. I think that's what the whole NFT thing is about, where they're trying to make one-of-a-kind digital things, which is bullshit. But anyway, the music stuff was really like the gasoline for everything I did. Like I said, I could look at things and tell you what I was listening to. I mean, like Master Jazz. I mean, yeah, it was really important for sure. And the musicians were always friends, and a lot of them were models for things I did, and things like that. So for sure, yeah. And like I said, I still do it today. I still play today, except with earplugs, because it's really loud. Anyway. Yeah. So music is really great for sure. Anything else?
Hi. So I know you said you got into being an artist because you felt like you weren't good at anything else. Was there a point, or like a specific point in your career, like maybe a dinner or a gallery that you got into that really solidified in your brain, like, wow, I made it, or I'm an artist at this point?
So like I said, I stayed really close. Cindy and I are like brother and sister, and I remember we both started to sell work around the same time, and although she was a little behind the curve because stupid people thought her work was photography, which was like, anyway, I remember calling her up and telling her, Cindy, I just bought a color TV, and she said, I just bought a stereo. And I think that was the point where I thought we made it, that was it, The fact that, the fact that we make our money on vertical real estate is always kind of amazes me for sure. I mean, it's like sometimes I think I'm involved in redistribution of wealth or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, but that was the moment. That was it seems like it's only yesterday to me with that phone call, but yeah. So that was a big deal for sure. I still have that color television. No, I don't. I have a much bigger color television.
What would you say is your favorite like individual piece that you made, and also what was your favorite like set? Like, do you think of your work as like the different sections or individual ones, or do you think of them as this is a whole collection and they're all like one thing?
Well, I could answer that with like the cool answer by saying like, my favorite piece is the next one I'm going to make, which is bullshit. But anyway, yeah, I have definitely favorite pieces for sure. I mean, but it's like trying to remember. It's like you know Robert Smithson, the artist Robert Smithson. He talks about tar pits and things like that. So I have this tar pit in my mind of like all the bits and pieces of work that are really relevant. It's hard, I couldn't really say. I mean, what I showed you tonight, those are basically my favorites. You know? I mean, I had this really great accountant when I was younger, who had been Stella's accountant in Rauschenberg, and he said to me, make sure every time you do a show, you save one piece out of the exhibition. And he said, you'll be okay, but just make sure you save one piece. And I have done that. So I have, in my own collection, I have probably like 50 or 60 of really great works that I saved myself. And you know, it's great because it also makes it, when I had to do museum shows, that I have this, you know, catalog of work that I don't have to ask lenders to work with, because I have the work there. So that was really important to save work. To save your work was really, save one piece out of every exhibition you do is really important. But yeah, I don't know. It's more like what pieces don't I like? So what I've done is I have bought pieces back. A couple pieces I bought back. A couple of them I destroyed. So there's some pieces that are out there that I wish I had back. Sure, they're not that bad, but. About one more question.
Hi.
That'll be a good one.
I hope so. I don't think anyone's touched on this because we've talked about your work in film and in all these different mediums, but I kind of wanted to ask you about your experience with the fashion world. And I know that you have a relationship with Rick Owens, and you've done work with Bottega Veneta, and so I kind of was wondering how you would describe the relationship between the artist and the fashion industry at large, and how you've seen it evolve since, like, over the decades and maybe the future. Like, what role can an artist play in that world specifically? And do you see importance to it?
No, it's interesting because when I did Men in Cities, I had a very strict code. Women wore dresses, men wore suits. It was like the uniform. It was like the urban uniform. Unfortunately, it got misconstrued as being yuppies, but they weren't. Everyone were either bands or artists. None of them were yuppies, but yeah, I was very, very conscious of that look for sure. And the fact is that when like Mad Men happens, things like I said, your art penetrates. If you're successful enough, you enter the culture, and then you lose authorship for sure. But then maybe 10 years ago, Bottega Veneta called me up. And they said, we'd really like to use, and I said, fuck you, I'm not doing this. They said, wait, we want to hire you. We want you to come for one day and do a photo shoot. And I'm saying, and then I realized I wanted a new car. So I asked for an obscene amount of money, and I worked for one day, I got an Audi Q5. So. And they were really great. The thing is, those fashion people are scared shit of artists. So Tom Mayer, who was the head of Bottega Veneta at the time, he was so terrified of me. He had to talk to me. He would have somebody else ask me a question. He said, Tom would like to ask you this question. It was very funny. It was like, yeah, but like someone like Rick Owens is like, we did this great interview together, and we both feel a moral imperative about what we do as artists, and I think there's a commonality with people that get to a certain degree of success and are still pushing it, that can communicate with each other, even though you're not in the same medium. I remember seeing when I went to see, he said, you have to come to see this fashion show. So it was in Paris, and it was like it was incredible. It was like seeing fashion only. It was done like Triumph of the Will. You know, Triumph of the Will by Leni Riefenstahl. It was intense. It was incredible. And he was mentioning we had similar influences about things. So we have come from the same place. I think the fashion stuff, I don't necessarily understand totally, but I mean, I know the way I like what I like, but when my wife buys a fashion magazine and I look at it, it's like, what the fuck is this? I can't figure it out. But yeah, I was definitely, I know what people are supposed to wear, and in that sense, I realized I like, even when I make drawings of cops, like riot cops, I really kind of like the way they look. I mean, they're wearing when I did a drawing of Ferguson, and I'm going, my God, these guys are all wearing all this military stuff. I mean, they must love it. Wow. Although it was so stupid, but all this leftover equipment from the Iraq War they were giving to police departments, and all these guys get their gloves on, they had football equipment on. It was pretty wild. I thought it was really strange. I know it's kind of weird because in Ferguson, what was interesting in Ferguson, the cops all looked like they were wearing equipment like football players, but then the kid that got shot was basically the size of a football player, but he wasn't wearing equipment. So, but anyway, but yeah, fashion's pretty interesting, but I don't, I actually have a very close friend, Cecil Rodriguez, who's actually designed he designed my wedding sports coat, things like that. It was really nice. We're basically the same size, which has really helped. So we have this empathy, really great. But I'm watching him going through his profession, where the pandemic kind of destroyed his company, and now he's working for somebody else right now. So I mean, it's really kind of tough. I can't understand it. And briefly, a friend of mine started a company called Brooklyn Surfer, and it was a cool idea, but it never went anywhere. So I can't imagine what it is. And problem is also everything's being made, nothing is made here. Everything's made someplace else. So, anyway. Cool. Does that answer it? Cool. Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you.